Before we get started, from now until May 22nd, I am running a giveaway for a free signed copy of The Littlest Elephant by Katherine Applegate. Follow the link in the description and subscribe there to enter. Must be within the United States to be eligible to win. And thank you for listening. Welcome to the Book Faire Podcast. My name is Anthony, and this podcast is all about children's literature and the freedom to read. For the next few months, I'm trying to highlight educational resources for parents to use during summer break to help continue their children's education. This week, we have an interview with Dr. Claire Freeland and Dr. Jacqueline Toner, former child psychologists and authors of What to Do When It's Not Fair, among other workbooks for young readers. Next week, we will have another episode covering new book releases as well as another interview on Friday. Make sure to follow the podcast wherever you are currently listening to stay up to date with the latest news in children's literature. Now, let's begin with this week's interview. Hello, Claire and Jackie. How are you two doing today?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you so much. Doing well.
Well, thank you two so much for being here. I'm happy to have both of you. Can we start off just by having you introduce yourselves for the audience? Claire, can you go first, please?
Sure. I'm Claire Freeland, and I worked for more than 30 years as a child psychologist. And now I'm writing books. Towards the end of those years, Jackie and I began to write, and we've both continued. Um, so books are my jam.
And Jackie?
So, without repeating what Claire said, I'm also a psychologist and practiced for many years, treating kids and families and teenagers, and then have been writing books both with Claire and on my own for over a decade now, which is astounding to me. I'm also a grandmother of 4 wonderful children.
And now the two of you have a whole series of books of what to do that are targeted to young people, covering different topics. And the one that I wanted to look at today was What to Do When It's Not Fair. Can you talk a little bit about that particular book and your perspectives as child psychologists going into something as seemingly mundane as telling a child, hey, sometimes something doesn't feel fair, which a parent can definitely identify with.
So I think for all of our books, they grew out of what we were seeing in our clinical practices. And that's where all the ideas came from. That's where the initial work that the books are built on came from, and they're also built on research in clinical interventions. And one of the things that we heard often as a complaint from children in our practices was it's not fair. And parents would have a hard time with kids who would just dig their heels in when things were not fair and get very upset and not be very good at regulating their emotions when they felt like they were getting cheated in some way in life.
This book is very special to us because it's the first one that we wrote for Imagination Press, which is an imprint of the American Psychological Association. And we noticed that there were a fair number of books about siblings and feeling it's not fair related to your siblings, but we were seeing other kind of situations as well. So we wanted to tackle the larger topic of envy and jealousy.
And what is the difference between envy and jealousy? Because as a layperson, I've heard those two terms used almost interchangeably. And so I feel like you two are probably really qualified to go into what the difference is between these two emotions.
So, jealousy is related, it is in relationships, jealous of attention from another person. Envy is not necessarily relationships, it's maybe wanting what someone else has. So that's the difference. Is more jealousy is of someone's attention, envy, everything else.
And so, as two child psychologists, when you decided to start looking at writing a book, what kind of research did you two begin with? What kind of format were you looking at initially? Did that change over time? And what kind of work did you bring in outside of your expertise in writing these books?
So the books, all the books that we write are based on cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, which is what we used largely, not exclusively, but largely in our practices because it's evidence based. There's research behind it to say that it's an effective form of treatment. So the books present the concepts, the concepts in the book are largely based on that type of therapy. And then we introduce other kinds of things in this book and in other books. Like there's we actually have some yoga poses at the end of the books as a way of self care, and calm breathing exercises as a way of self care. Claire, do you want to add?
Yeah. So Imagination Press had already some books by a different author in this what to do when format. So we had inquired and they asked, "Oh, okay, we like that topic. Can you do it in this what to do when format?" And so that's how we got to this kind of interactive book that personalizes the experience for the child, um, and gives examples of all sorts. As far as the cognitive behavioral piece, I think it's would be helpful to know that the fundamental um, thinking is that our emotions uh, are affected by what we think, and what we think is affected by what we do, and it's a circular interactive phenomenon. So we look at different ways kids think and how they could think differently to help them feel differently and to help them act differently.
I should also add that this book and the other ones that we've written are workbooks. So there are exercises for the kids to do to help them practice the skills that we're teaching them. It's not just yapping at them. They actually get to do things as part of the learning process.
Jackie, you were reading my mind. I was just about to say, Claire, you said that these are interactive books, and Jackie, you brought up yoga poses. Can you two talk about some of the ways that this is an interactive book, and what are some of the basics that a child or a parent giving this to a child can expect?
One of the ways that we start, so the book, this particular book uses a theme of some friendly pirates to help talk about some of the concepts. And so we start the book by talking about how um, one of the reasons that we might envy something is because we overly focused on what we don't have and start and disregard the things that we do have. So we have an exercise where a child takes a piece of paper and rolls it into a spyglass, a pirate's spyglass. And if you close one eye and look through your spyglass, you'll notice that you can zero in and focus on certain things in your environment. But at the same time you're doing that, you're also missing all the other things in your environment. So, for example, there's a picture of a little girl who is looking out the window fondly, enviously at a boy who has a new puppy. And she's thinking, no fair, I want a puppy. And she's missing the fact that she's surrounded by all these pets she already has in her room. So the child is invited to find the pets and put circles around all the pets that she's not paying attention to.
Claire, did you have anything to add for that?
Well, we have throughout the book exercises to demonstrate an alternative way to think about your world. But by the way, we think that these books work really well if an adult is engaging as well. So while a child could do the book by themselves, I think they get more mileage if the adults in their lives uh, join them. Then the grown up can also learn different cues to help the child think differently, and they can engage on this journey together.
And are there any resources for the adults as well?
So the beginning of the book begins with a section for all of the adults in the child's life who may be working with them, and gives them some notions of what we're going to be talking about, and also some additional kinds of information to help kids who are struggling with these issues. Um, so that's all of our books start out that way, with basically information for parents and caregivers.
And I find that, Claire, as you said, bringing the adult in to work along so that they can get a better understanding. One of the greatest things that an adult and a parent and a guardian can do is to be involved with a child's education or reading habits. Can you two talk a little bit about, as child psychologists, what kind of effect do you see having an active parent has on a child going through either psychological care or just through regular development?
I think it's crucial. I mean, and one of the reasons that I started thinking about making books is I used to use them a lot in my practice. So when I had kids, I also do a lot of art. And when I had a kid in my practice, I would be working through problems with them, and I would actually have them help me write a book for them, which would talk about them, and we would draw pictures together. Um, about the problems they were working on and what they were going to try to do differently. And we would share that with their parent so the parent would know what we were doing. And then the child could take the book home with them, just as they can take these books home with them. And it would allow the parent child to have the same language to talk about what they were working on. And it would provide a way for the kids to practice new skills because, therapy, particularly for children, isn't just explaining something and then you're gone. It has to be incorporated into their daily life. They have to hear repetition. That's how children learn, is to have information repeated. So I think that makes the books very valuable. And actually, clinicians use the books frequently in their clinical practice.
It doesn't have to be a parent, it could be any adult who has a close relationship with the child.
That can include like aunts, uncles, teachers, therapists,
Guidance
any
counselors. Yeah.
adult guidance counselors, of course. And Jackie, you had talked a little bit before we started recording about some of the other books that were in this series. Particularly, you brought up "What to Do When Fear Interferes," and just very briefly, can you go over how that book is different from "What to Do When It's Not Fair"?
Well, I think so. I don't even remember how many we've done now, quite a few. So we've done one on fear. We've done one about making mistakes and having it be okay to make mistakes. Um, I did one about what to do when the news scares you, and I'm leaving something out, Claire.
When you have shy
Oh,
feelings.
when you're too shy. And so a lot of the general concepts are the same, but the examples that kids are given are obviously different. And some of the, we don't encompass everything in every book. So some books have some information and other books have other information, particularly about the kinds of thoughts that can get in the way and make things hard to deal with. Um, and different ways that kids can gain perspective depending on the particular problem that they're struggling with.
And you said that some of the ideas and information are universal. Taking, for example, "What to Do When It's Not Fair." Suppose a child has this book, and what are some examples of situations, maybe some sort of exercises from this book that they could apply outside of feelings of envy and jealousy?
So, one of the things we talk about in that book is one of the um, types of thoughts that can often lead to difficult feelings is what's called forever thoughts. So if you say to yourself that this is going to happen forever or this is going to happen in all situations, when that's not really true, you can make yourself feel, you can end up feeling much worse than if you say, this is just a for now thought. This is just a temporary situation. So then we give examples of that for the kids, and we also give them statements for them to identify whether it's a for now thought or for a forever thought. So here's some examples from the book. These are forever thoughts. I never get any cool clothes. I'll never be as good at math as other kids. I'll never win any races. And then the types of thoughts that we call for now thoughts are things like sometimes my chores interfere with fun things. I'm working hard on my multiplication tables. I guess my new boots are pretty cool. So things like that to differentiate different different perspectives that a child might take and different self-talk that they might learn to make themselves more able to handle difficult feelings.
So the two of you discussed how these books are heavily inspired by cognitive behavioral therapy tactics, and one of the things that that I was thinking about just hearing the two of you speak is how these are lifelong skills. These are concepts and things that can apply to not just children but adults. And I think that more broadly speaking, as two former child psychologists, how do you see that the general ideas of psychology that apply to adults and children, how you cater those specifically to a young person, how you tackle different ideas, and how some things end up being more similar to adult patients?
One of the things that find really funny for all of our books, particularly the mistakes book and the and my one about the news, is that we often get comments from adults saying, "Would you please write a book like this for grown-ups?" Because I wish I'd known this a long time ago. So the concepts are the same for adults and for kids, and to some degree, I think it's helpful for parents to hear these things because some of the negative self-talk comes from the ways parents talk. So if parents can think differently, talk differently, that can also be helpful for kids. But obviously, when we're writing these books for children, we're using child examples that relate to children. We're using simple language and simple examples and simple illustrations.
In everyday life, I hear people saying things like, uh, "I'm not good at math," just as an example, and kids who have worked through these books will recognize that as, um, a statement that could get in the way, especially for a kid who's learning in school. So we teach the concepts of needing practice, needing more practice, um, and just not being so black and white about it.
And Jackie, you also mentioned comments from adults and what to do when it's not fair. This is the revised edition, so the original has been out for a few years already. Uh, Claire and Jackie, can you two talk about other things that you've heard from not just adults, but maybe from some clinicians that have used these books have used these books with children in their practice?
Yes. So yeah, I think that it's helpful for guidance counselors and clinicians to have the books as a basis to jump off from. Um, and it's very much of a teaching tool. So when a child comes into the psychologist's office, it doesn't really work well to just say, "Tell me how you're feeling," although we will ask, "How are you feeling?" It's important to have some other ways of engaging that we know from research make a difference. And if you think about something differently, it can change how you look at things.
Yeah, one of the things that's different about working with young children as opposed to I worked with a lot of adolescents and some with adults is that when an adult or a teenager comes in for therapy, they have their agenda of what it is they want to work on, and in a lot of and if it's possible, in most cases it is, you let them take the lead and you follow where they want to go. Kids are brought into a therapy session by somebody else. They may not even see what they're coming for as a problem. They may just see it as what is. So it's helpful to have something to structure the time together and to raise issues that they might not be ready to raise or they might not be even aware of, to say, Let's talk about some of this stuff and let's think about different ways a person could think about this that doesn't put them on the spot in ways that they're not yet able to handle."
They see the kids in the book thinking like they think, and so they don't feel so alone.
And that's definitely something. And you talked about how the 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 characters and it's all presented as uh, friendly pirates. And so seeing other children in their situation, even if it's in a book, it's that whole idea of representation in media. And so when a child sees another child like themselves, it's almost disarming. It makes them feel like it's not, it makes them feel like they aren't weird for having certain feelings of jealousy or envy. And even the title of the book, of What to Do When It's Not Fair, is breaking it down to their level. Can you two talk a little bit about the intentionality of that language when it comes to, and I'm sure that as child psychologists, you have a lot of insight on this, um, presenting this information to young people?
I mean, I wanna say young people are remarkable in their readiness for this kind of input. They're excited about it and they can relate to it. They haven't gotten so stuck the way we adults are, set in our ways. They're resilient, and if you, present, something that makes sense, they really grab onto it.
And they're used to learning things from things like workbooks. So this doesn't seem like something s- strange or unusual to them to sort of be encountering new information through this kind of a format.
And I wanted to bring things to a close. I usually ask the same question to all guests on the podcast, and typically it's with fiction writers. So I'm excited to see what your perspectives are. So we'll go one at a time. Claire, how do you see yourself and the work that you do as a writer?
Oh gosh. Um, so the work that, I have done in writing for Imagination Press, I see as taking, what I did in my office all those years and leaving a gift to children and families. Some of the books are like these workbooks, and others are about the science of psychology, and so forth. But so I see that as kind of a tying a ribbon on those years of practice and getting that connection, even though I don't know personally the children who are looking at the books. Um, Outside of writing these books, I am working on some others, so that's exciting too. And yeah, the process of writing, it's very creative um and I enjoy talking to children in that format.
And Jackie, how do you see yourself and the work that you do as a writer?
So the work that I have done as a writer, I see as sharing, as Claire said, sharing some of the work that I've done in the past with kids to a broader audience. We've also written some science books for kids, which I really love. We wrote a book about that's just an introduction to psychology for middle grade kids, and then we wrote a book, or I wrote a book that Claire did. Claire was busy with other things. I wrote a book about basically misinformation and disinformation, but for a young audience, for middle grade kids. And it's also science based. And I just think psychology is cool. And I like sharing that with kids. And I like, for those books, I had to do a lot of research and I really enjoyed doing the research. And like Claire, I'm also working on something that's not related to psychology, which is a weird kind of how do I describe it? It's a novel for middle grade kids that involves a little bit of fantasy and is also has little pieces of memoir for me thrown in, that I'm just really enjoying writing. I mean, I really enjoy the process of writing, and I really enjoy thinking about kids as an audience as I write.
Thank you. That was an interview with Dr. Jacqueline Toner and Dr. Claire Freeland. Their book, What to Do When It's Not Fair, is available now, along with various other books by Imagination Press. You can learn more about Dr. Freeland, Dr. Toner, and their work at clairefreelandwrites.com, jacquelinetoner.net, and apa.org/pubs/magination. If you appreciate the work being done on this show, there are a number of ways to show your support. First, you can like, comment, or follow wherever you are currently listening to help push the show out to new listeners. Second, you can follow on Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky at Book Faire Pod. Lastly, you can follow the show on Patreon at patreon.com/thebookfair. Following is free and there are no posts hidden behind a paywall. Of course, the best way to help the Book Faire Podcast grow is simply to share it with a friend, an educator, or a young reader in your life. Thank you so very much for listening, and as always, I'll talk at you next time.